I'm Andrea Isabel Lucas, founder of Bar and Soul and author of Own It All. The Own It All podcast is all about how to stop waiting for change and start creating it because your life belongs to you. Every week, I interview inspiring women and they share their tips about how to own it all in the various areas of your life, like career, time management, health, style, and relationships. Tune in every week so they can share their advice with you. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review in your favorite listening app. Hi, and welcome to the Own It All podcast. I am so excited. My guest today is Sarah Von Bargen. Sarah helps people spend their time, money, and energy on purpose. She has an amazingly popular blog and has been blogging pretty much longer than anybody. And I've learned so many amazing tips and life hacks. And she also has fantastic online courses. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. As I was saying, I have gotten so much out of reading your blog posts. I have to say that, first of all, you just come across as a very approachable and friendly person that like everyone kind of can imagine they're already friends with you when they read your blog. I feel like people must.
Oh, that is so kind of you to say. I am very approachable and normal.
Yeah, I would agree. I feel like you are normal and normal with like just enough weirdness to be normal.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, I've learned a lot from reading your blog about really how to spend time productively and effectively. And I feel like you have an emphasis on not just productivity in terms of like building your resume, but like productivity in terms of doing what you actually most want to be doing. And I know that spending your time, money, and energy on purpose is really what you do. So I'm very excited that you're here chatting with us on the topic of owning your time today. So one of the chapters in my book is dedicated to owning your time. And I just wanted to start by thinking a little bit about like, why is owning your time important? What does it mean for your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think on a pretty deep level, like how you spend your minutes and hours and days is how you spend your life. And it's really, really, really easy for all of us, myself included, to get caught up in day-to-day stuff, in little petty dramas, in errands and social media. And then all of a sudden, 4 years have passed. And what do we have to show for it? It's so easy to sort of tell ourselves like, oh, I'm really busy, so I don't have time to do that. Or like, things are just so crazy right now. I don't have time to commit to that project. I don't have time to call my mom. I don't have time to like follow up with my friend who's going through a breakup. I don't have time to go for a run. It is so easy to create loopholes and excuses. Some of which, sometimes life does get busy, but if we don't make time for or prioritize the things that are important to us, time passes whether you spend it, intentionally or not. And it sucks to wake up, 3, 4, 5 years later and realize you're not any closer to that thing that you said you wanted than you were 5 years ago.
That's such a good point. Like I've definitely heard people say, I want to go back and maybe get this or that degree or work towards something that's going to be very long term and say, yeah, but I'll be 30 by then. I'll be 40 by then, as if that time isn't going to pass either way.
It's going to pass anyway. So you might as well spend it on purpose.
And do you have any go-to strategies or tips for helping people to figure out what on purpose means for them and like what is most important to them?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say the first thing, to me, it all starts with being incredibly, incredibly honest with yourself about what you want and what makes you happy, which seems obvious, but I think it can be surprisingly hard. And I think a lot of us, especially women, have a tendency to have subconsciously absorbed messaging around what we should want, what success should look like, what happiness should look like, what professional success looks like. And it's really hard. I think we all had the experience where we work towards something that we have been led to believe will fulfill us or make us happy. And then you get there and maybe, you feel good for a few days because you accomplished this goal. And then you either A, realize this was not what you wanted, or B, you realize like no matter where you go, there you are. And the anxieties and struggles that you had when you were working towards your master's degree or when you were trying to, be able to bench press a certain amount or like beat a certain running time or get married or have a kid, like they're still there. So I think it really starts with being honest with yourself about what makes you happy and what you actually want, not just what you've been encouraged to want or told you should want.
Yeah, that's really huge. In my book, I talked a little bit about that because I had kind of an epiphany about that in this workshop that I was doing. I was like in the midst of just kind of refiguring out my life. I was still trying to work on finishing my bachelor's. This was in my late 20s. And someone suggested that I check out women's studies. And there happened to be like a women's studies conference that weekend. It was like perfect timing. And I went and I had such a breakthrough. I popped into this little session that I expected to be, kind of fluffy. To be honest, it was like 3 ways to feel more confident in your decision making or something. And the person leading it was a women's confidence coach. And like, I had at the time, like a stereotype or something in my head that I really expected this to be really fluffy, like, I don't know, like a Cosmo article or something. And when I went in there, she really dropped kind of a truth bomb on me, because she said, if you always honor your authentic self, you'll always feel good about the decisions that you make. And she defined authentic self as, identifying your values, your talents, and your passions. And gosh, until I started journaling, as we were prompted to do in that workshop, I hadn't realized how much I had been chasing after external approval and all the things that I thought would make me look good and would make other people happy with me versus who I really was on the inside and what really lit me up. So that was a really huge breakthrough, to be honest, as you're saying. And I'm sure it's hard for people not to judge themselves when they do take that honest look.
Absolutely. And I think that it can be hard because we've spent, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our lives absorbing these messages about what a successful woman looks like in terms of her body, her career, her earning potential, the house she lives in. And it's not like in a single day you can just peel that off and say, like, I'm going to be honest. Like it takes work. It takes a lot of introspection. But I think that a rule of thumb that I tell people is, especially when it comes to a new life choice that you're considering, if you're considering upgrading your car, buying a second home, getting some sort of cosmetic procedure, anything, buying a new handbag, if 3 people in your life have recently made the same decision, take a step back and double check that it's right for you, because everything is socially contagious and we don't even necessarily realize it. So if 3 people in your life have done this thing in the last year, step back and double check that it is right for you. I mean, sometimes it is right for you. Like, I didn't know that having a Roomba would change my life until all of my friends got Roombas. So sometimes, I'm not saying that you can't ever do things that your friends or family are doing, but it's really important to double check with yourself that you're doing this because it's right for you and it will benefit your life. And it's not messaging that you've sort of absorbed subconsciously.
I can't even tell you how much you just blew my mind with that tip. My jaw's on the floor. I have to pick it back up. Like, that's so brilliant. I'm so excited that you just shared that. I am just like, I can't wait to actually check this out for myself in my own life. I'm guessing I'm going to see it everywhere.
It's crazy when you start to think about it. Like, I'm 39 and a bunch of my friends are starting to get fillers and Botox, totally their choice. When I'm doing that thing where I'm looking in the mirror, you like pull your face back with your fingers and stuff and sort of thinking like, maybe that's something I should do. And then I thought, Sarah, literally 7 people have done this in the last year. Like, let's take a step back. Like, if nobody in my life had done this, would I be even thinking about it? I'm pretty sure not.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I feel like that's what's happening around in my area with eyelash extensions. You almost feel naked without them now, but
yes. Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about how to decide what is important to you and what finds its way onto your calendar. Because to your point, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, right? So once we know what is important to us and what we do want to try to make time for, what are some of the tips that you have for actually making that a reality?
Well, one of the things that I always encourage people to start with, and everyone is exceptionally resistant to this, but I would say, number one, put an app on your phone that tracks your social media use. There's one for iPhone and there's one for Android, and their names escape me, but it's easy to Google. Put that on your phone, let it track your phone use for like a week, and then be prepared to be pretty disappointed in yourself. Like, I love Instagram as much as the next person. I'm not here to say that you can't use Instagram, but for a lot of us, we're on Instagram or we're using our phones, hours and hours a day. And if we want to write that novel, if we want to run a marathon, if we want to buy a house, that is time that would probably be better spent not on Instagram. And usually just seeing a hard number associated with that is enough to sort of shock us into action. So I would say the first step is to figure out how much time you're spending on your phone. And then also you can put similar apps on your computer that will tell you how much time you're spending on Netflix, how much time you're spending on Facebook, how much time you're spending reading forums about, gossip or something. Because between those two things, I am very confident that the average American could rescue somewhere between 1 and 3 hours a day just by using their time differently. Seeing those hard numbers will often sort of shock us into taking action.
Yeah. I actually had that come up recently with one of the early readers for my book. And she was saying, I was telling her how I use the screen time setting on my iPhone to limit how much time I can spend on my social media apps. So what I used to do is really just delete them off of my phone and only try to go online to use them. But Instagram doesn't really work perfectly that way. I usually end up with them back on my phone sooner or later. So I do have my screen time set to 35 minutes a day for my social media apps. And then it just kind of an hourglass pops up and it tells you that you've reached your limit for the day. And there's different settings as to how much you can override that or not. So sometimes you just have to re-enter your password to get another 15 minutes or to open up that app for the rest of the day. And I do find myself grabbing an extra 15 minutes here and there. So it's not perfect. It does help and it helps with the awareness. But it was funny because the woman I was chatting with about it, she was saying that she hates the screen time setting on her phone because she finds it depressing because then she beats herself up about at the end of the week when it gives you that report and you see all the time that you spent. And I mean, social media is super addictive. So, tough.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and it's hard too, because it is incredibly, I do some version of this in my money course as well, because I think it's really important to acknowledge to ourselves the realities of how we're spending our time and money. And I've had to build in a section about you're probably going to be surprised by these results. It might make you feel bad. I don't want you to feel bad. And whatever results you get, you're not the first person to realize that you spent 12 hours a week on Instagram. You're not the first person to realize that you spent $15,000 this year eating out. And I think just knowing that this result is incredibly common can be helpful. And also social media is literally designed to be addictive. I mean, there's a lot that we can do to overcome it, but it has been people very clever designers and coders have worked very hard to make these things appealing to us and to make our brains crave them. There are all these studies about how serotonin releases in your brain when you log into Facebook and see a red little notification button.
So what strategies do you personally use to try to not overdo it on social media?
I know that my phone is a trigger for me, so I don't even keep it in the same room as me. I keep it honestly, it could be a little bit. My husband's always why don't you answer my phone calls? And I'm because I have the ringer turned off and my phone is in another room. So just email me. But so I don't even keep my phone in the same room as me. I use the Pomodoro method, which is a productivity method where you do 25 minutes of focused work and then you have a 5-minute break. But I realized that even using the timer on my phone was a trigger for me. So I got a kitchen timer, a little just a little egg timer that you twist that I use instead. I block sites from my computer, so I can only I can't log on to Facebook, Pinterest. There are 5 websites that I can't log on to before 2 p.m. because I find that if I can get in a good stretch of productivity until 2 p.m., then I can. And also, I mean, if I start working at 8 and I'm working till 2, I'm pretty, that's it. That's pretty much the end of the workday for me.
Yeah.
And so then it's not a big deal if I'm on Facebook or on Twitter or something. But I have found for me, there's a lot of work to be done. If you truly want to change a habit, it is, requires some pretty deep emotional and psychological work, but you can make some really significant progress with just sort of almost like a Band-Aid approach, just making it easier to be good and harder to be bad by putting these sort of barricades in place.
I like where you're going with that too, because it's that idea of done is better than perfect, or that we're all a work in progress. You don't have to wait until you have this master plan of how you're going to just be so flawless in how you spend your time. It's okay to just make incremental progress.
Yeah. And something that I talk about with my habit school students is I call it Indiana Jonesing your bad habit. Like, in Indiana Jones, when he goes into the cave and I think he's stealing the crystal skull and he swaps out for like a bag of sand. To do that with a bad habit that you're trying to break. You don't have to go cold turkey. Some people, their brain chemistry works like that. A lot of people, it doesn't. So, for example, I had fallen into a bad habit. I have never watched the TV show Gilmore Girls. I started watching it and I was watching it during lunch. And it would be pretty easy to all of a sudden I'm watching two during lunch and they're like 45-minute episodes. So I put the blocker on Netflix. So I can't watch any Netflix until 2 p.m. And now, instead of watching Gilmore Girls during lunch, I listen to a podcast that is about Gilmore Girls while I eat lunch. So it's a pretty painless swap.
Right.
But it's much shorter and it's much easier to stop a podcast than it is to stop a TV show.
True.
And also, just as a side note, like eating soup on the sofa is like messy and dangerous. So, don't do that, Sarah. But so it was a really easy swap to make. It was much easier to make that transition than it would be to be like, oh, I go from like spending an hour watching a really fun TV show to now like nothing. So I think it's also good to take baby steps. Like you don't have to go from being a couch potato to running 5 miles every day. You don't have to do that. You don't have to go from, spending $700 a month on, frivolous shopping things to spending zero. Like it is totally possible to like baby step your way back and just swap out a bad habit for like a less bad version and just do that repeatedly until you're in a place that you're proud of.
That's great advice. And you mentioned that you use the Pomodoro method. Mm-hmm. I sometimes am able to do that. My work is it's a little bit different every day. So I'm not always like sitting down to a focused task. A lot of times I'm on phone calls or meetings or things like that throughout the day or running around. But when I am able to sit down and work on a task, especially if it's a task I don't want to do and that I am avoiding, I do love the Pomodoro method. And someone actually turned me on to a specific planner. It's called the Productivity Planner. It has a all black cover with gold letters and it just says Productivity Planner. And each day you list your priorities for the day in order of importance. And then it has little circles for you to fill in for each Pomodoro that you do for that activity. And you plan like today I'm going to spend, 4 Pomodoros, which is essentially like a half hour with a 5-minute break included on say like PR outreach or something. And then at the end of the day, you rank how productive you felt the day was and then what happened. So I love it. And then at the end of the week, you do like a whole planning thing for the week and you list out your priorities for the week. You list what wasn't finished last week. You kind of roll that over. And I've really taken a liking to that planner. I've been using, I think I'm on my 3rd one now. It's really good.
Oh, wow. That sounds awesome. I love what I have found, what I do, because I try really hard to track my process, not my progress, because progress is so much slower than we want it to be. And so instead of putting on my to-do list, like, finish sales copy, I say spend 2 hours working on sales copy. And then I put 4 circles. So, that would be 4 Pomodoros because I can't really tell if I'm going to be able to finish my sales copy in 2 hours or not, but I can certainly make for sure that I work on it for 2 hours. And then I can feel proud of myself for keeping my promise to myself and doing what I said I was going to do and being able to cross that item off the list because I did work on it for 2 hours.
I love that so much. And I think that's so applicable to so many different goals, whether it's a fitness goal or anything like that. It's like, how about I just work out, 4 times this week or whatever that, instead of like, I'm going to weigh X by X date, which is, first of all, weight is just the worst possible way to measure your fitness progress anyway. Because it can be so deceiving if you're gaining muscle. I just love that. And it's true. I've heard it said before that like, it's more important to be the kind of person or act like the kind of person who has X as opposed to just naming the goal and being like, I'm going to have X. Yeah. Like focus on just being the kind of person and taking the kind of daily actions that person would have or that would have that thing.
Yeah. Because and the thing is, I tell my habit school students all the time, it's not magic. Like if you keep doing this stuff, if you do this stuff every day, you're going to get where you want to go. But when you obsessively count calories or obsessively count, anything, like it's really easy to get discouraged because progress is so much slower than we think it is. But if you just keep doing it, if you like send the networking email every single day, if you write a blog post every single week, if you send pitches to editors every single week, if you just keep doing it, something is going to happen. It's a numbers game. Like it's just a law of averages, something is going to happen. But if you just commit to keeping your promise to yourself and commit to doing it and make it a habit, you'll get where you want to go.
That's great advice. And what is Habit School?
Habit School, it is my 6-week course. There is a DIY version, but I'm running a live version. Shameless plug, enrollment starts March 19th and the class actually starts March 25th. It's a 6-week program where we talk about how to make or break habits. And we collectively as a group, there's usually between 200 or 300 people in the class. We all focus on one habit that we're working on over that time. There are live Q&As, there are weekly emails, there are accountability challenges. It's great. People love it. Like they've used it to develop a workout habit, to develop a daily writing habit. I have a habit that I want to work on, but I'm waiting until Habit School starts because I love doing it with other people. Last time I did it, I completely quit caffeine. So people use it for all sorts of stuff. It's really, people love it and it's helped them accomplish awesome stuff.
Wow, that's so great. And you mentioned a bit earlier in our conversation something about people wanting to spend more time with their friends or like investing more in their friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is something I've seen you write about in the past. I feel like this is a topic we don't talk about that much or emphasize enough. Maybe it's just a cultural thing, but we're constantly, again, looking to improve our productivity, improve our health and fitness. And I think it's interesting, the idea of really working on our relationships in terms of actual payoff and like how much happier you could be.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Do you have any tips that you want to share with us for how to make more friends or improve our friendships as adults?
Hey, it's Andrea here. Thank you so much for listening. I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that my book, Own It All, is now available to be ordered at Amazon. And go get your copy. And by the way, my 8-week Own It All challenge starts soon. You can get more information and sign up for that at AndreaIsabelLucas.com/challenge.
Do you have any tips that you want to share with us for how to make more friends or improve our friendships as adults?
Well, I would say one of the things that I constantly recommend to people is every Sunday night to plan the fun that you're going to have for the coming week. Like literally write it in your calendar, because when you don't plan it, it doesn't happen. I mean, I think we all, especially like if you're married, if you have kids, if you have a demanding career, it is very, very easy for your friendships to become, like third or fourth or fifth priority. And then again, 6 months pass and you haven't seen that friend. Little do you know, she went through a terrible breakup and changed jobs. So I literally plan in every Sunday night, I plan in the fun I'm going to have. Like I'm going to go to see the ice castles in Excelsior. And so then I email other friends who are self-employed who can go with me during the day. I am having coffee with another girlfriend to hear about an awesome date that she went on. I'm doing that after we get off this call. We're having friends over for brunch this weekend. And that's all stuff that I planned. Like I just sat down with my calendar and made it happen. And also the enjoyment that we get out of any experience or event is 30% of the enjoyment we get comes from anticipating it. So being able to look at my calendar and know that I have this fun stuff planned, it increases how much enjoyment I get out of it. Like, so obviously I enjoy meeting my friend for coffee and hearing about what's going on with her, but I also get a lot of enjoyment about thinking about it and thinking about like, oh, we're meeting at that coffee shop that I love. And oh my gosh, like I can't wait to hear what happened. Like just knowing that I have this stuff to look forward to adds to my life. So honestly, I just plan it. It's not sexy.
And I think I've seen you write about how to make friends as an adult, because I feel like that's something we never talk about.
And I mean, it's awkward because it feels like we should know how to do it. But I mean, honestly, what I just do is I am fortunate that I have a pretty big friend group and they're always like sort of bringing new people in, or, I have a few high-powered lady coffee groups, and there'll maybe be somebody in there who I think like, I really want to get to know them better. So I make for sure that we're friends on social media. And then, when I see them like in a group setting, I make for sure that, we have a one-on-one conversation. And then inevitably in those conversations, we'll talk about like, oh, we both love this book, or, oh, we both love this author or this movie or something. And so then I will tag them in something on social media, or like send them an email being like, I loved, talking with you about how great East of Eden is. Have you seen this article about it? So I just sort of try to start like deepening the friendship. And then I, invite them out. I invite them to do something. And I mean, the truth is, it is awkward. It's kind of like dating. And, just because you want to be closer friends with somebody doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen. And also, like depending on if they have kids, if they travel a lot for work, like it could just be circumstantial. Like they could think you're great, but they might just not have time to, like there are two women specifically who I want to be much closer with, but they both have two kids under 4. So that's not happening. So I think it's a combination of putting yourself out there, being intentional about it, and realizing that they're not all going to be home runs. But also, just because somebody doesn't necessarily have time for you in this season of your life doesn't mean that you can't be closer friends later. And it also doesn't mean that it's something against you.
Right. Yes. That reminds me of the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally.
Yes, absolutely.
You mentioned to me your motto, better takes less time than you think. What does that mean?
So I think a lot of us have a tendency to believe, like I'm thinking specifically about like morning routines. Like whenever I write about or blog about my morning routine, I get lots of comments like, wow, gosh, that seems amazing. Like that's so relaxing. That's so lovely. And I once I did a little experiment where I timed the difference between like, if I took my time and had this sort of lovely morning that I prefer to have, or if I did sort of like the rushed version where I like, didn't take time to read with my coffee, or like I sort of like rushed the dog through her walk and like wouldn't let her smell anything, or I like didn't put on eyeliner, or like threw on an outfit that I wasn't particularly excited about. And the difference between the rushed morning and the like lovely relaxed morning, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was something like, it was less than 10 minutes. Like it was a very small amount of time, but it totally impacted the rest of my day. I mean, unsurprisingly, like if you're wearing an outfit that you like, if you have taken time to like make yourself look cute, if you had time to like read a few pages in a book that you really like and eat your breakfast sitting down, like unsurprisingly, that makes you a much more pleasant coworker or pleasant boss or pleasant partner, and just like have a better attitude throughout the day.
Not to mention like your nervous system and how it's going to help your digestion, like your stress levels, even just your clarity of thinking, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Or even, I think it's really easy at the end of the night to like, oh, the kitchen's a mess, the living room's a mess. Like, I don't have time to deal with this. And then we get up in the morning and the kitchen is still a mess and the living room is still a mess. But, setting the timer on your phone for 5 minutes and like, putting the pillows back to where they're supposed to be and like wiping down the counter. Like you can get a lot done in 5 minutes.
Right.
Like you could probably clean most of the kitchen in 5 minutes, and it will dramatically affect how the rest of your day goes.
That's really great advice. And it is easy to get overwhelmed and go into like overwhelm or like even kind of analysis paralysis and just start like, and then kind of freeze and not do anything, as opposed to just setting that timer and doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I literally, and I think the other benefit to using a timer is I feel I'm a recovered perfectionist, but I still have those tendencies. And so a lot of times I will like sort of work too hard and like burn myself out. And I will like, I'm just going to clean up the kitchen. And then it's, like an hour and a half later and I'm like scrubbing the fridge with a toothbrush. Or so then I don't start, or I do too much and like burn myself out. But so if I set a timer for 5 minutes, it's going to be a big difference in what it looks like. And it's also going to limit me from like getting weird about it. So that's the other benefit of the timer is like, if you're somebody who has a tendency towards that sort of stuff, you're not going to like overdo it.
I think that's really great advice. I was listening to a talk a few weeks back, and the presenter said, never ask a perfectionist, have you done your best?
Oh God, that's terrible.
And I always struggle with the 4th agreement because it's always do your best. And it's like, what does that even mean? Like, because if I do my best at everything, I'm not going to get,
you're not going to get anywhere. You're going to burn out. Yeah. And also like best is so subjective, and it's so easy to think like, yes, I did my best, but it sure doesn't look like anything compared to that other person's best.
So true. Yeah. How I relate with that particular agreement is a little more the Brene Brown variation, which is like everyone is actually doing their best,
Yes.
including me,
Mhm.
like our best. And they do say that in the four agreements, like your best will differ from day to day. If you're well, if you're sick, all of that. Your best doesn't mean like the best.
Yes. Yeah.
But-
Just try. Like, I just want to know, I want to put in enough effort. My core desired feelings from the Desire Map, which I imagine you've read as well, are lean, proud, and free. Like, I want to be proud of the work that I've done. Like, it doesn't have to be absolutely flawless, but I want the work that I hand off to my clients, or the work, that I create for my readers and my online course students. I want to be proud of it. That doesn't mean that like there's never going to be a typo. That doesn't mean that, there's never going to be some like tech screw up during a Facebook Live. But by and large, what I am delivering is something that I'm proud of.
I love that. And I do love the Desire Map. And I think, figuring out your core desired feelings is really huge because, again, a feeling is a lot different than a measurable result per se. And actually more to the point, I think. So speaking of Danielle Laporte, who wrote the Desire Map, she has an exercise that I love that I talked about in my book as well, which is a stop doing list. Since we compulsively make to-do lists, it's just making a list of what you're not going to do. And have you ever played around with making one?
I have not, but I can tell you the things like I don't wear high heels. They hurt my feet, so I don't wear high heels. I don't work out in like a super serious, like go to a gym and it's leg day sort of way. I'm much more like, I take the dog for long walks. I go out dancing with my friends. I go hiking. I run almost all of my errands on foot. I like do some planks during commercials or something, but I'm not counting macros. I'm not going to a gym. I'm not, concerned about wailing on my glutes. I eat gluten. I eat dairy. I'm not interested in not eating them. And also I don't drink very much, but when I do, it's more like I am at a beautiful restaurant that is known for amazing cocktails. I don't usually go to a party and everybody's drinking. I'm like, well, I guess I better have a beer. So I don't drink sort of as part of the social contract.
Obligatory kind of way.
I don't engage in like obligatory drinking. And I also don't really engage in obligatory gift giving. Like I will totally give you a wedding present, and I will totally like give you a, like if you invite me to your baby shower, I'll totally buy something off the registry. But generally speaking, like when it comes to Christmas, I give presents to my nieces, my stepsons, and my husband, and that's it. But I should also say I'm very fortunate that my parents and my sister and the other people in my life like are also not into obligatory gift giving. It can be a lot harder if the other people in your life are. So those are sort of on my stop doing / I never want to do them anyway list.
I like that. I think that's really huge. Before I bought my house, when we lived in a condo, I just didn't get into decorating. Like it just was completely off the table. And I wasn't interested in investing. I knew we wouldn't stay in that condo and I just wasn't interested in the time I would have to invest in that. So I waited. And once I got the house, I got really into decorating it. And it was a huge, huge time commitment that I'm glad I had that energy freed up prior to having a house, because honestly, it's probably one of the reasons I was able to build my business is because I wasn't spending time trying to have this Pinterest worthy, home. Currently on my stop doing list, speaking of time management, is just stopping letting domestic stuff bleed into my work day because I work from home, because that's really challenging for me right now, because it is so convenient that you can run an errand during the day, or you can start cleaning up the living room because it didn't get cleaned up the night before. But also like, I only have so many hours a day when I have the house to myself. And if I use that time for domestic stuff, then I end up resentful when my family starts coming home because I'm like, I didn't get any work done today. So yes, that's on my list at the moment. And then kind of in the same vein as that, I would say, if people want to own their time, we're going to have to say no to things.
Yes.
Otherwise, we won't have any time really left over to decide what to do with. So any tips on saying no, or just like anything to say on that topic?
Well, I would say I always thank somebody for inviting me. And then I try to say something that is honest, but nice. And I also don't say, please keep me in the loop for future invites if I do not want to be kept in the loop for future invites.
Okay.
Which I think is something that people say like out of politeness, like, oh, thanks so much for inviting me. Can't this time, but please keep me in the loop. But like, if you don't want to be in the loop, don't say you want to be in the loop.
Mhm.
I think the other thing that I do is I will, because sometimes it's not no to the person, it's no to that specific event. Like, I don't want to go to your house party that 150 people are going to go to where there's a cake. Like, I'm not interested in that. But I do want to see
Mhm.
you. So I'll say, like, sorry you can't make it, but I'd love to see you. Are you free for dinner next week? So I do a lot of redirecting. Or, sometimes maybe somebody will want to see me, but I don't want to meet at the super expensive meat heavy restaurant that they want to meet at. Or
Mm.
I know that I honestly cannot handle being around them for the 3-hour meal that they're going to want. So I will say like, oh, I'd love to see you. Could we meet for coffee instead? Or the other thing, and this is something I actually teach to my Bank Boost students in regards to money, is if there's like a group text going out about like we haven't seen each other for a long time and these friends well enough to know that they're going to suggest going like we're all going to like drive downtown, pay $1 million for parking, go to the super expensive restaurant, get cocktails, go out, and that it's already like it's going to be like
Mhm.
$200 before anybody even makes the suggestion, so you don't have to say no. Be the person who takes initiative to suggest something that is a better fit for you.
Mm.
So if you know that somebody's going to ask you to do something that will be a no for you, but you want to see them or you want to have that interaction, take initiative to suggest something that would be a yes for you.
I love that. And that's really owning your time because you're not waiting for the opportunity, you're not waiting for someone else to kind of make the move. You're just stepping up and owning
Mhm.
it. Speaking of owning it and owning it all, one thing that I love to ask everybody on the podcast is, a huge theme of my book and really what owning it all is about is that idea of not waiting for permission, not waiting for an invitation, and really choosing yourself and just going for it. And can you think of an example of a time when maybe you weren't offered a seat at the table or that you weren't given permission or an invitation, but you went ahead and created your own opportunity?
Oh gosh, I feel like my entire career is doing that. I started Yes and Yes 10 years ago, which is crazy in like I'm a total dinosaur in internet terms. But I created Yes and Yes because there was a type of blog that I wanted to read that at the time didn't exist. So I just decided I would make it myself. And then I did, and my career was born. And now I've been self-employed for 8 years doing this. So I basically just, created the
Mm.
blog I wanted to see in the world.
And I imagine that you didn't see results immediately when you first started.
No, 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 sure. No, it took me and I know in terms of self-employment or in terms of like building a business, I have been very fortunate because I blogged for 2.5 years and, I was working full time and blogging, and within 2.5 years I was able to quit. And, now I make a comfortable living being self-employed and writing and blogging. But 2.5 years is still a while to stick with something. When I first started blogging, I remember I had a 45-minute lunch break at my job, and I would spend every lunch break, every weekday, going around to other blogs and leaving comments on other blogs so I could network with these people.
Mm.
So I don't know the math on that, but 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 2.5 years. And to this day, I am still friends with people that I did that to. Like one of my biggest freelancing clients, she used to be a blogger and now she's a managing editor at a huge website. And I write articles for her every single month.
Wow.
And this is somebody I left, and I've met her in person. I've slept in her guest room. And this is all because, 10 years ago, I left a comment on her blog.
Wow, that's amazing. So in the early stages of getting started, what kept you going doing it? Like, it's not like you knew at that time that Yes and Yes was going to have such a huge following that it does today.
Well, honestly, I just really loved doing it. Like
Mhm.
I think this sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I'm truly not. That when I first started blogging for probably the first year or two, I didn't need to sleep as much. Like I literally was so excited and so electrified by this idea that I could just write about anything I wanted Like I could have an idea at 10 a.m. and by 11:30 I had written a blog post about it. And by noon, someone somewhere else in the world had read my idea and then commented on it. Like that just blew my mind. And it felt amazing. So honestly, I just kept going because I loved it and because I was getting positive feedback. I wasn't making any money, but I was making friendships and connections, and I was talking about things that felt important to me. And I mean, I know it's sort of trite, but there does need to be a kernel of passion in what you do. Like, I'm not here to tell everybody like follow your passion, you'll never work a day in your life, because that's not true. But you like, it can't just be about like strategy and your business model and leveraging your following. Like, you have to feel passionate about it, because there are going to be days where things are boring and hard, and you need that passion to sustain you.
Absolutely. And in the course of this, you sounds like you are super passionate about your career and what you do, and really have been since the start. Along the way, have there been times where, you've gotten a no, or where something has just totally bombed and not worked out? And how did you pivot, or how did you keep on going at that point?
Oh my gosh. Yes, for sure. Like there have been, like big name brand partnerships that, got yanked out. There have been innumerable times where I've written something where I'm like, this is going to go viral, and then nobody cares. Or like I wrote a blog post that was a listicle. It was just a listicle that I threw together in like an hour, and it went so viral. It crashed my website 4 times. I called my host and they were like, you're at the top of like, you'll have to like move to a new host because we don't have enough bandwidth for you. And it was just some listicle. It's called 23 Ways to Treat Yourself That Don't Involve Eating or Buying Anything. It just went completely bonkers. And it was just something I threw together. I have 3 online courses. One is called Make It Stick Habit School, which is about changing habits. One is called Put Your Money Where Your Happy Is, which is about sort of doing the deeper work about changing your relationship with spending and money. And one is called Bank Boost, which is a very like nitty gritty. We're all going to like put ourselves on a tight budget for 6 weeks while simultaneously doing stuff to bring in extra money. And Put Your Money Where Your Happy Is was the first course that I created. And it's, from what I've seen, totally unlike anything in the personal finance space, because most things in personal finance are like churn your credit cards, use coupons, like pay off your mortgage ahead of time, all of which is great advice, but it doesn't get to the deeper issue of like why you're buying that shit you don't need. So I was like, this is amazing. I know it's going to work for people. And the thing is, it absolutely works. It's an amazing course and it absolutely works. But the thing is, nobody wants to get to the heart of why they're spending, the way they are. People will very happily, like use all their gift cards, or like bring lunch to work, or, take an extra shift. Like that, people are very comfortable with that. And you can get amazing results with that. Like the last time I ran Bank Boost, the average student brought in between $2,000 and $4,000 in 1 month. And these are like social workers and teachers. This is not, anybody who's making $400,000 a year. But the fact is, I created the course that I thought people would want, that I would have wanted, but that's not how business works. Like you have to make the thing that people want and that they're ready for, not the thing that you think they should have.
So when it comes to time management, it's important to have a system for keeping track of what you need to get done, right? And we do need to-do lists, but I do think sometimes to-do lists kind of fall short. Either we get carried away and we're spending more time making lists than doing the things on the list, or we're making these unattainable, really lengthy lists that we are not making enough progress on, and then we feel bad about it. Do you have any tips on to-do list making?
Yes. So I write a to-do list every night before I go to bed, so I can sort of like empty out my brain so I don't have to lay in bed thinking about it. And because I am pretty type A, and I am someone who's prone to writing, like 3-page long to-do lists, instead, I actually specifically use a small notebook, because if I use a big notebook, my sad little short to-do list makes me feel bad. But so I only have a 5-item to-do list every day. And it's 3 significant things. And then one thing that's incredibly concrete, like, pick up prescription, like something that's very doable and easy. And one thing that's fun. Like I literally put fun into my to-do list, because otherwise, because of just who I am as a human, I won't have fun. So on my to-do list today is literally meet Meredith for coffee. Like that is on my to-do list. And my bigger items on my to-do list, like we mentioned before, instead of completing the task, it's devoting a certain amount of time to a task. So maybe on my to-do list, it would say like spend 2 hours writing copy for Alexa. And then there would be 4 circles underneath that I color in as I complete the Pomodoros for those. So it's 3 larger items, 1 super concrete item, and 1 fun item. And the other thing that I do is I also include stuff like this on my to-do list. So even though like you're kind of the one doing the hard work of putting this podcast together, it's still something that's on my calendar, and it's still something that like I structure my day around. So on my to-do list for today is talk to Andrea for her podcast.
I love that. And then if you don't put it on your to-do list, because it's in your calendar, so yes, it is redundant, but if it's not on your to-do list, then at the end of the day, it might not look like you really did much.
Yeah. And I also, I don't remember where I got this tip, but I always put verbs in my to-do list. I don't remember the psychology behind this, but so I always say like chat with Andrea, drink coffee with Meredith, run to Home Depot, write sales page. Because for whatever reason, that's more motivating to our brains than just like sales page, coffee with Meredith, Andrea podcast.
Well, and it can be overwhelming too. Like if I just write something like PR in my to-do.
Yeah, what does that even mean?
Like that's my most daunting and overwhelming task right now with my book launch happening. So that's why I keep referencing it. And when I put it in my to-do list like that, it's kind of like nauseating actually. So, and I love your approach. And even like I have this massive list of contacts and it's like, oh, contact everyone on the list. Like, I don't even know if there's enough hours this month for me to do that. So I love the idea instead of like spend an hour on PR today, spend 5 hours this week or something. That's so much more doable. So if people want to read your blog or find out about your courses, where should they go?
Everything is on my blog, which is yesandyes.org. And you can find me all over social media. My handle is yesandyesblog. I am very active on Instagram stories. That's probably my favorite platform.
And Habit School is kicking off very shortly.
Yes. Habit School enrollment opens on the 19th and class starts on the 25th. And the last time I ran, my live versions of my courses are super popular. And the last time I ran a live course, it sold out in 4 days. So if you are interested, I would encourage you to either snap it up as soon as it opens or get on my newsletter list so that you'll be the first to know when the doors open.
Awesome. And we will be sure to include that link in the show notes. And you guys should get on her newsletter list anyway, because you won't regret it. You're super great, Sarah, about like really adding value and just delivering content that is so helpful and well organized. Yes, I appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. It was so great to get to chat with you. And I look forward to keeping in touch and hearing more about Habit School. And I hope our listeners will start to follow along as well.
Thank you so much.
I'm Andrea Isabel Lucas, and this has been the Own It All podcast. Thank you so much for listening this week. If you liked what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite listening app. It really helps, and I would be so grateful. I'll be back next Wednesday with a brand new episode. See you then.